Murders like this are not common in a small town like Port Angeles. This was one guy went in there and shot at somebody 28 times. That's why this case stands out to me. We have 28 shell casings, and he had 17 entry wounds in his body. He was out to destroy this person.
Our friendship ended in anger. But was it always like that? No way.
Patrick and Gary were friends, close friends.
I guess it all started way back, years before Patrick and I got to know each other.
Me? I always spent a lot of time outdoors, trying to be in touch with nature.
Patrick grew up in the Olympic Peninsula for the most part, maybe a little bit in California when he was younger. And he loved this area.
Patrick was working on a farm here in the Olympic Peninsula, doing basic farm work, hoeing, weeding, working 12 to 16 hours a day, doing organic farming. I would say Patrick was content working on the farm. He was tired a lot, but he definitely had a sense of purpose.
I showed up here a few years before I met Patrick. I was new to town, but I was hard to miss.
Gary's 6'3", he's got lots of freckles. Gary is a big goofball, like, not shy at all, not worried about anything or trying to impress anybody.
He knows he's good looking. He's nice to look at. I mean, and he's just fun to be around.
I was born in the eastern part of Washington State. It took till I was a teenager to wind up here on the Olympic Peninsula.
Childhood for Gary was pretty rough, you know, going in and out of foster homes and group homes and not having a steady mom and dad at home. That was rough for him. It took a toll on him. Gary went to work at a mill, and he got up, went to work every day, 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, sometimes 6 days a week.
I was the kind of guy who always smiled, kept the dark stuff underneath. And then I ran into someone who made me smile for real.
Gary and I met in the summer of 2004.
Leslie opened my eyes to so many things, made me see the potential in myself. And I guess it was through her that I met someone else in her circle of friends.
Because it's a real small town. Everybody kind of knows everybody, so Patrick and Gary just met under the same circumstances, just met in passing at a party.
Gary and Leslie got married, and pretty soon they started having kids.
Patrick was making very good strides towards becoming a productive member of society. And I was trying to convince him that as far as good behavior goes, hours turn into days and days turn into years, and eventually you'll become a success.
They say it's a bad idea to keep your old friends around after you get clean. Maybe we should have taken that advice.
Gary Blanton did have a conviction for rape in the 3rd degree. It was a conviction that happened, I believe, when he was 17 years old.
Where he had been going to school, and there was this girl that he had liked, and he maybe was a year older or two, and he had a sexual relationship with this girl in school. He had gotten caught, and the family had pressed charges.
He was convicted. He did go to prison for that. As a result, he was on the sex registration list.
He really wanted to do what was best and what was right and prove to people in the community that he could show everybody that he really was a good person.
But then the day came when I thought everything would be taken away from me.
Gary and Leslie were at work, and the kids were home with a babysitter. They came home from work, and the babysitter left, and Leslie had to go back to work, so Gary went to bed. You know, it's kind of hard to put the pieces together of what happened when nobody was there.
All I know is Leslie started getting a bunch of phone calls from Gary.
I called Gary back, and he was frantic. And Gary doesn't get upset about anything.
His arm was hanging limp, and he wouldn't stop crying.
And they took him to the emergency room to find out that he had a couple broken bones.
The officer, when he talked to Gary, he says, "Well, come on, Mr. Blanton. You're a sex offender. You must have done it." We know you did it, just say it.
As a result of the broken arm, the court had ordered Gary Blanton that he was not allowed to be living in the same household as Leslie Blanton and the child, and that he had moved out at that time.
Child Services threw the book at him.
There was a current investigation regarding Gary and a child in his house, his youngest child. We have a sex offender list that we publish on our website so that we inform the citizens of the county where the registered sex offenders are living. There's also a state registration where you can go onto a state website and find out who the registered sex offenders are and where they're living.
I was trying to put my past behind me. When Patrick stumbled on my name, he got all high and mighty.
I wanted to help Gary when he was in a situation in his life where I wanted to give Gary a place where he could stay sometimes. Patrick had approached me one day and he had called me like 4 a.m., 5 a.m., 6 a.m., 3 or 4 times. I wanted to come over to my house.
I know that Patrick went out and there was a fight out there, a physical altercation.
After that, I didn't see Gary for a while. And that was probably good for me. Things were finally coming together for me. But for Gary, it was a different story.
I lost my job at the mill, spent my time crashing with friends, playing video games. After months of bouncing around, I got a call from the last person I'd ever expect.
He went and offered him a room, probably for cheaper rent or whatever, you know, which I thought was strange because they have been in a really big fist fight.
I was on the phone with Gary. He was saying how Patrick was in the kitchen cutting up potatoes, boiling them, and I was on my way there. Everything was fine. Then I get a text. And it said, don't come out. We're going camping instead.
It came down to me and Gary, alone in that little cabin.
My wife was coming over to visit that night, but she got a message not to come.
Gary was playing this video game on the computer.
I was hanging out online, and Patrick was on the porch. And then the lights went out.
Patrick unloads his gun on Gary. He then leaves to go out and get another magazine out of his vehicle.
Gary was on the phone down for 911 trying to get help. Gary's calling for help. And he went and got a flashlight and came back and he shot him 2 more times in the head. And then he just left him there.
Sir, can you hear me? Push the button if you can hear me.
It was a cell phone. They triangulate it. They get close. They responded within minutes of the cell phone call. They were probably within 50 to 75 yards from the actual crime scene itself. They were unable to locate it.
It gave Patrick time to get away.
I drove 15 miles to another house, kicked in the door, and did the same thing again.
At the crime scene itself, in the threshold of the door, there was a plastic notebook. Inside that plastic notebook, there was a typed out 2-page declaration signed by Patrick Drum.
Women and children must feel and be safe. I can no longer stand idle while their tears are unanswered.
He had a plan to go take out some other sex offenders, both here in Washington and in Oregon.
The manhunt lasted less than 8 hours, and thankfully we were able to capture him and take him into custody. He was then transported back to the courthouse. I assigned a deputy to do the interview. Patrick Drum at that time confessed to the murders.
I cut the power, ran up on him, and unloaded 2 clips into him. You guys do it with handcuffs, I do it my way.
Patrick Drum was very proud of what he did. He showed no remorse, and to this day, he's never shown any remorse.
The charges against Gary were dropped, I think like 2 weeks after he was dead.